Welcome to the Grace and Grit podcast, made for women who want their healthiest years to be ahead of them, not behind them. Join your host, Courtney Townley, right now as she breaks down the fairy tale health story you have been chasing all of your life into sensible action steps and lasting change. Hello, my friends, and welcome to the Grace and Grit podcast. This is your host, Courtney Townley. I have some serious goodness for you today. If you are a regular listener, you often hear me talk about my private community called Rumble and Rise. Rumble and Rise is a membership program that is always open for registration, and many of the members have come in through this podcast. So they listened to this podcast for a while, they totally resonated with the message, and then they decided to take their education and experience to another level. So they came into Rumble and Rise. And Rumble and Rise was designed to fill a void. And I want to explain what I mean by that. I am a midlife woman whose definition of health has expanded way beyond the topics of diet and exercise. Obviously, those topics are still important to me, but I also feel, especially at this age and stage of my life, that I have a hunger and a need to have conversations around health that are far more expansive than just diet and exercise alone. And I was struggling to find community that defined health through the lens of expansion rather than shrinking, right? Because in my view, health really is an exercise in expansion. It's expanding your relationship with yourself. It's expanding the possibility for your life. It's expanding your capacity to feel difficult things and go after challenges. It is not an exercise in shrinking, but man has our popular media culture kind of boiled it down to that. Just get smaller, way less, right? Fit into a smaller size of clothes. I'm not interested in that conversation. I was also struggling to find a community that would explore health in a really integrative way. So clearly, physical health is important. We want to have healthy blood profiles and good hormone panels and all of the things. However, we cannot neglect, or we should not neglect, that the things that disrupt our blood panels and our chemistry and our hormones are things beyond just physical. Our mental health, our emotional health, our relationship health, how we interact with our work. All of these things impact our chemistry. I also wanted a space where I could develop myself alongside of other women in the sense that we were building practices for leading ourselves well versus just chasing outcomes. Certainly, putting a focus on our future self versus our past self. I don't want to spend the rest of my life chasing something I've been. I want to step into what I can be. And I also wanted to be in a community that encouraged self-leadership rather than outsourcing decision-making. I spent a large chunk of my life following people, trying to find people who could tell me how to make the most of my life, how to optimize my health, all the things. I spent a tremendous amount of time, energy, and money in pursuit of that, and ultimately came into the space of realizing that I was the person who needed to be leading me for sustainability, for authenticity, to really make the most out of my life. I needed to be the one calling the shots. So I was looking for this community that I couldn't find. So I created it, and it is called Rumble and Rise. And in the last episode of the podcast, episode 283, I explored the path to health reimagined. And I talked about a lot of the things I just mentioned. And today I am so thrilled to have two Rumble and Rise members joining me to share with you their experience of how this community has helped them to live their life by design rather than by default. It has helped them to rebuild the relationship that they have with themselves, cell to soul. It has helped them to step into a leadership role, not just in the health arena, not just through their health journey, but throughout their life. So they can truly put their healthiest and happiest years ahead of them rather than behind them. So we're going to get right to it because this is an awesome conversation that I am so excited to share with you. And let me just say, if this lands for you, if it lights you up, if you connect with the things that we are talking about here, come join us. graceandgrit.com/ready to rumble. All right. So welcome to the Grace and Grit podcast. Heather and Brittany, I'm so happy to have you here.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Yeah, it's so fun. And we're actually, at the time of recording, this is a Saturday morning at 8 a.m. So I am especially appreciative for you taking the time to sort of share your experience of Rumble and Rise with listeners. So to get started, I'd love to just begin by asking you both to introduce yourself. Just tell us your name, where you live, and maybe kind of just what your main priorities in life are right now. Brittany, let's start with you.
My name is Brittany Weiss. I live in Missoula, Montana. My days are spent chasing kids and working. I am an HR manager for a regional craft brewery, and just in that age and stage of life where it's just busy. The calendar is always packed, and managing time is the name of the game.
Do you mind telling listeners how old you are?
38.
38. Yeah.
Oh, not quite. In 2 weeks, I'll be 38.
You're on the verge.
I better soak up those last 2 weeks.
I love it. I asked that question specifically because I think that a large majority of the Rumble and Rise community is really between like kind of late 30s to really late 60s. That seems to be sort of the main group. Certainly there's outliers. There are people younger than that. There are people older than that. But that is kind of the population. And I think it's because of a lot of the topics that we discuss. But also, like you just said, Brittany, it's kind of the age and stage of life. There's so many responsibilities. And we're also going into this transition that doesn't make us super amazing at managing stress, right? It definitely challenges our capacity to manage stress. So thank you for sharing that. Heather, how about you?
Well, I am a 47-year-old mother of three. I live in Mercer Island, Washington, and I am also a part-time health coach and personal trainer. And I feel like I came into your work right at the right time during the beginning of these renovation years, during a very stressful time in my life when we had just completed a third international move. And my world was upside down. And I needed all of the stuff that you teach in order to get my head straight and have a path forward. So that's me. I probably work about 10 to 15 hours a week right now, maybe sometimes more if I'm doing some back-end stuff. But I finally feel like I have it to a level where my life feels in balance again.
Oh, what a good feeling, right? Enjoy that wave. I love it. And I think it's important to note too that, you are in the wellness industry, you are in the wellness space. And I think it's fascinating to know that like probably 15 to 20% of our membership is, right? There's a lot of people that join Rumble and Rise who are in some way, shape, or form in the wellness industry. There's physicians, there are trainers, there are health coaches, there are therapists, a little bit of everything. And I think part of the reason why that is true, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, is because a lot of us came in from a very specialized field, right? Where we kind of talk about one dimension of health and we're uber passionate about it. And as we enter that doorway, we start realizing that there's so much more that needs to be addressed to really help whatever dimension of health we are actually teaching. So if it's physical health, we realize that it's not just movement, right, that makes a person healthy. It's all these other things that are affecting somebody's lifestyle and somebody's total stress load. Do you have anything you want to say to that?
Yeah. Well, I couldn't agree more. I certainly came into it from that exact space of physical health, first from the movement side and then from the nutrition side. And I basically was there physically myself, 100%, as good as I possibly could be, probably a lot better than most at my age. And yet I was just struggling with my brain and my relationships and all the stuff that is also health that makes you feel like a whole person and really can affect your physical health. Like I remember feeling like I was not recovering very well, if I wasn't sleeping well, or if I was just really, really stressed out from whatever happening in my life. And so clearly, even though I was checking all the boxes on my calendar with physical health, it certainly was affected by some of these other things. But you realize that it is so multidimensional to feel 100% like you're comfortable, and that you can stop the anxiety and just feel like I'm feeling good in my body and in my mind, and I'm comfortable with my path forward and all those things. So your work has really resonated with me in so many ways. And now that I'm coaching people myself, I'm really aware of all the underlying things that may have happened, the little micro traumas in their life, that led to this point to ask for help with their physical health, when in fact, they need to solve these other things in order for that trigger to actually be pulled.
Yeah. So I'm curious with the movement piece for you, because I know you're such a movement advocate and you're just a passionate mover. And I'm like, in what ways did you notice that the other stressors were affecting your movement practice? Or did you notice it was harder for you to recover? Did you notice that you just weren't as passionate about it as you used to be? Like, what were some of the signposts that there were other things you needed to address?
Well, the world that I'm exposed to, which is very similar to the one you are, Courtney, people who get into this space are rabidly passionate about it and spending hours upon hours per day. And the community that is formed around that is one of just like diving in way too much, to the point where their bodies really can't handle that level of stress, but they almost compare themselves to each other and their success in that movement space with the crazy skills that they can do, or all the stuff they're putting out on social media in some cases. And I know for me, I was feeling like I don't have time for that, as a mother of three, to be able to practice at that level. And I feel like I would try, to get there as much as I could, but I was never feeling confident in myself or my practice, or I would just overdo it, so I would get injured and I wasn't recovering. Sometimes I would feel like I had to take a nap, every afternoon because I was just so physically tired all the time. So I knew I wasn't quite comfortable, with my life in balance with movement as one piece of it. And so it really did take some work on the brain management side, the thought management side, to feel like I'm really comfortable with my practice where it is right now. And, I have less injuries as a result. So,
yeah, it's interesting. I feel I've always been passionate about this conversation and this work, but I feel like it really ignited when I was immersed in a movement community that was largely male, young men,
yes,
to be specific.
Yes.
And there weren't a lot of women. And if there were women, they didn't have children. They weren't in their 40s, right? So it was like, all of a sudden I was really faced with like all this awareness of, wow, this is a really special and unique time of life, right? That definitely has some unique needs that need to be met. And I needed people in the community to be having those conversations, and nobody was.
Yeah, I can't believe I even left that out. I mean, I'm such an anomaly, to boot in this movement world. And even when I came back to America we were in Hong Kong at the time when I got introduced to the practice, everybody who was practicing in Seattle was 15 to 20 to 25 years younger. than me.
Yeah.
Without kids,
Yep.
without all the responsibilities of midlife. And I'm like, why am I holding myself to this standard? This
Yep.
is ridiculous.
Absolutely. Yeah. So good. Okay. So here's my next question for both of you. And I love this question. You often hear me say, like, your healthiest years can be ahead of you if you want them to be. They don't have to be in the rearview mirror, because I think there's a lot of people who listen to the Grace and Grit podcast who feel like their healthiest years are behind them. And that's part of the problem, right? Is that they feel like the best is over. So your healthiest years can be ahead of you. But in order to make that happen, you have to redefine what health means to you at this age and stage of life. Because I guarantee your definition of health has changed since you were 20 or 30 or before kids or all the things, right? Like, you've evolved as a human, and your needs to honor your health have surely evolved. So I want to know from both of you, how do you define health at this age and stage of life? And how do you define it differently than you would have 10 or 20 years ago? Brittany, let's start with you.
I think 20 years ago, it was all centered around body, right? It was how that body looked,
Yeah.
how it was supposed to look, whether or not that fit some predefined standard. Now I'm focused on longevity, and you see older people on the ski hill, like 80 plus. I'm like, I just want to be able to do that. I want to have the energy and the strength to be able to do that and do it well. I ski with my dad, who's 64 years old, and he skis darn near as good as he did when he was 35, if not better, because now he's got a fake knee.
Yeah.
And really is hard to keep up with, is legitimately difficult for me to ski with. And that's what I want my kids to say about me. I want them to ride the chairlift and be like, oh, she's kind of hard to keep up with for an old gal. And I want to feel like I'm well fed, both from a brain perspective and from a nutrition perspective. When I have tons of energy, I really look forward to, I kind of joke, I'll sit with the old guys at the bar at Snowbowl, and they talk about, now they're retired, they've got all this time to ski. It's like, well, that's what I'm looking forward to, right? Having that retirement, like 4 or 5 days a week, can chase the powder days, can do the same during the summer as far as like hiking, biking, going where I want to be. And I want to be able to physically do that when the time comes. Because right now, as you heard me say in the introduction, it's all about fitting in those little slivers of time. And so I want to be able to leverage that time once it comes back, as my kids grow up and no longer want to hang out with me.
I love that you're bringing this up, because my parents, I would say, are examples of that too. Like, they really live such an active life. They're in their 70s. Nothing slows them down. And something that they tell me all the time is it's actually really hard for them to find friends who are equally as active, because a lot of them are suffering from injuries or illnesses, or they're just so deconditioned that they don't feel comfortable doing these activities. And I was actually just talking to a client the other day who's in her mid 70s. She still works full time. And she was saying that one of her fears about retirement is exactly that she is going to have all this time on her hands, but she's not going to have her work colleagues who kind of are part of her social unit right now. And she's afraid that a lot of the people that she associates with at this point in her life outside of work aren't going to be active because they're experiencing so much physiological breakdown. So I think it's such a real thing. And, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I know retirement is like this thing that we're conditioned to sort of aspire to from the day we enter the workforce. And I think that if we don't have a plan for retirement in terms of how we want to spend that time, number one, we may not necessarily take care of ourselves in a way that afford us the ability to do the things we want to be doing. But it can also just be, in a way, very depressing for people, because now they feel like they're kind of lost. They don't have the community to hang out with. So I love that about this space of Rumble and Rise, because I do feel like we have such a diverse age group, and we do have a lot of, older women in the community who are really trying to make the best of what is to come. Even if that's retirement, they want to make the most of it. So yeah, I love that you brought that up.
And it seems a little funny to talk about retirement when I'm just about to turn 38 years old. But in order to be physically capable when you're 80, you've got to get all your ducks in a row starting now. So you have to have made those steps. You can't just switch and decide you're going to do that when you're 72.
Yeah.
So you have to have built those good habits and good strength and a really good, strong foundation. So it feels like it's a good building block to get there is now.
Well, it's really interesting because I feel this way about the perimenopausal and menopausal years, where a lot of women enter that space and they're pissed at their bodies because they're like, how come this all changed overnight? It didn't necessarily change overnight. There was messaging coming from our 20s and 30s, right? And sort of the way we abused our bodies in those years that definitely feeds into our experience of that transition. I'm not saying that even if you took perfect care of yourself, whatever that is, in your 20s and 30s, that you wouldn't experience some discomfort in perimenopause and menopause. But I do think that we're always taking a hit for our decisions, especially if they're right decisions that are depleting us. We just don't necessarily feel it until we are rolling into later in life. So yes, like your, late 30s, 40s, 50s, we're thinking about being hopefully really robust in our later years. And what can we do now to contribute to that? But I would say let's encourage even the younger generation to start that in their 20s and 30s, because it just makes life so much more pleasurable. Heather, how about you? How would you define health at this age and stage of your life? And how does it differ from maybe 10 or 20 years ago?
Yeah, well, if you look back, like most women, I was conditioned to equate my health with smallness. I remember even in high school. So I'm like a 17-year-old cheerleader, and I kind of was a late bloomer. And so when I had first started cheerleading as a sophomore when I was a senior, my body was physically larger. I had grown. And I remember thinking that I think I was 118 pounds, at the time, like nothing, right? Like just tiny human. And I remember even then thinking, I'll feel healthy and great at 108, that I needed to lose 10 pounds as a senior who was active, who was a young woman. And then I remember going through my 20s, always feeling like I needed to be smaller. And I did a lot of aerobics. I don't know, aerobics was a thing back then, step aerobics. Yeah. And that turned into, I think, like Body Attack and, programs like that a little bit later, in my 30s as, losing the pregnancy weight, that kind of thing. But just exhausting, right? Like it was always about the number on the scale or what have you. And I felt like that changed for me when I got introduced to the movement practice at around 40. So I sort of got lucky in that way because it wasn't defined by weight. And like those women who would come into the practice who were kind of in that mindset, they would quickly leave, because they could see that it wasn't about that. But for me, I started to develop a lot more strength and mobility in my body. And I'm like, this is so much better. I actually am a lot more capable, physically capable than I was then when I was only cared about, the number on the scale or what have you. But anyway, that's kind of the physical part. But I think more than that is, I think when you're young, you're always kind of burdened with a certain anxiety about the future and sort of like collecting things in your life, whether it's a husband or kids or the house or the car or the travel, all that stuff. And that's how you define success and health and certainly your body and your clothing size and things like that. And that's just exhausting. It's also very, surface level and materialistic. And that does not equate a happy life. And I think what I have found now, in this midlife stage is what really matters to me is community, setting myself up for the future, so that I'm not alone, and that I have the physical capabilities to do all the stuff that I want to do, kind of to what Bethany was saying. And so I've really evolved my health practices, to be way beyond physical health. And is physical health important? Absolutely. And I spend time on that every day, meal prepping and moving and all that stuff. But sometimes I'll just give myself a day off, if I feel like I'm really sore, my body is telling me that I need to slow down today. It doesn't mean that I need to stop, but it just means I need to slow down. And, I feel like yeah, I don't look today at 47 like I looked at 37, like maybe
Nor should you,
more
right?
wrinkled. I've got some more gray hairs.
Yeah.
I had my first surgery because I overdid it one time, my foot, so little injuries have crept up and that kind of thing. So, things are kind of breaking down a little bit, but because I've been focused on a more holistic approach, I feel like if I can compared myself to like the average 47-year-old mom, way ahead. But is the work over? No, I don't think it's ever over.
Never. So what I hear so loud and clear as you're talking is that you've really shifted your perspective from kind of how your life looks to how your life feels.
Yeah.
Right. And even when we're just talking about like physical health, this is such an important concept. And I think it's one of the most healing concepts that I can encourage a woman to grasp, which is embodiment, right? Is how comfortable and at peace you feel in your body. But what we have, a lot of us are kind of breaking away from, and what we kind of grew up being conditioned to really focus on was how we think about our body, right? And I'm not saying how you think about your body doesn't matter. Of course, your beliefs about your body influence your behavior. But we spend so much time thinking about the body and shaping it from the outside that we actually don't go in and do the real work, which is how at peace am I with myself when I'm by myself, right? Yeah, I love that. So good. Okay, so both of you very clear on kind of the different definitions from, over the past 10 or 20 years. So knowing, like Brittany, knowing that you're really aspiring to have this amazing future, right? Regardless of age, regardless of stage, you have trust in your body and you can tackle the things that you want to be doing. How has Rumble and Rise helped set you up for that?
Rumble and Rise has really taught me so much more about the mindset piece of it. I think, I worked with trainers in the past. I did any number of class and probably every diet you could ever pick out. And that's just all focused on the physical. And that just doesn't ever solve the problem, right? You hit a burnout stage. Yes, you lose 15 pounds. Yes, you lose 20 pounds, but it's not sustainable because like you said, you're not at peace with that. Mm-hmm. You lose 20, but you're pushing for 25. You can't figure out how you get to 25. And it's when you focus on kind of the mindset piece of it and really forgiving yourself for being bigger than you were when you were 18, it starts to kind of click into place a little bit. And you start to understand like, well, there's a really good reason why I'm not the size I am when I was 18. I don't spend 6 hours outside. I spend 9 hours sitting at a computer screen.
Yeah.
And then fit all the rest of it into my day after chasing kids and doing laundry and making meals. And so you start to understand that you got to meet yourself where you're at, forgive yourself a little bit,
or a lot.
Priorities. Yeah. And over again, that's the one thing that I'm learning is like those patterns are really hard to break. And so even when you start doing all the right things, you still get that like all or nothing thinking of like, well, when I was 20, if I did all of these workouts all of these times, this would have happened.
Yeah.
But only this has happened. So how, what am I doing wrong? And it's taking a step back and being like, no, this is great. This is really good progress.
Yeah. So I've shared this a lot, probably inside of Rumble and Rise and certainly on the podcast, but my husband being a builder, he will often have clients come to him and say, like, I want to do this to my bathroom. Is it possible? And he's like, anything is possible for a price. Right. And I think that is just so true of the health space and kind of the, if we're not even talking about health, but we're talking about reshaping the body, right? Which isn't always a health conversation. You can have whatever you want. If you want to look like you did when you were 17, there's ways to make that happen. But if you look through the lens of how you define health at this age and stage of life, does that even make sense? Does looking like you did at 17 and what that's going to cost you to achieve that, is it worth the trade-offs that you're going to have to make? Because this is the real, right? I'm always talking about integrity. Integrity is really honoring the wholeness of who you are as a person. And like each of you, as you came in today, I was asking like, what are your priorities in life right now? And neither of you said, looking like I did on high school graduation day, right? So yeah, so I think we shift the lens at which like we're looking through health at, that it's not physical. It's what, I mean, yes, it's physical, but it's what it's allowing me to do in other spaces of my life and how it's allowing me to show up in those places. And also recognizing that the time I take to connect with my loved ones, the sleep that I get at night, doing work that I'm passionate about is contributing just as much to my health as food and exercise. Right?
Yeah, there's no question.
Go ahead, Heather.
Yeah, I mean, I think that all of those things matter as much, as the physical health triggers that would traditionally be defined as such. We learned so much in Rumble and Rise about kind of, you've chunked it into 4 areas: chemistry, strategy, emotional agility. What's the last one?
Thought management.
Thought management. Thank you. Yeah. And all of those things are as important. And you really need to, I think at this stage, dig into that stuff only. And for us specifically within Rumble and Rise, there really hasn't been anything else that I have seen out there that has provided women with really specific tools to be able to explore those aspects of our health, because it's certainly not given to us in mainstream media or the diet and fitness industry or anything like that. And I remember kind of really connecting with you first on the physical health side, because we sort of had that in common. But I remember, I think I was listening to, it was just 5 to Thrive. And it was it was like number 5. It was the thing around thought management at that time. I'm like, oh my God, she's talking to me, directly at me and my issues. And we didn't even talk about this, at first. But I know that, this is a big problem for me. And the more I dug into it, and, you have just really pollinated the site over the years with such good content. That aspect of it is probably the most valuable to women right now, because we just have had the least amount of tools and exposure and support and teaching.
Well, and we've segregated it. It's like we have taken the human experience and broken it into all these separate pieces. Like, you can go to a mental health professional, you can go to a personal trainer, you can go to, like a digestive health specialist. Like, and I'm not saying that specialists aren't important. Of course they are, because we do tend to have suffer more in certain areas at times. And that insight is invaluable. But where do we go to address the whole human? Right? That's my rumble. Like, as a woman midlife, I don't want to go to 500 different spaces to have these conversations, right? If I need acute help in one area, of course, I'm going to seek out a specialist. But if I'm looking to up-level my health as a whole human and just stay on top of these considerations and these parts of myself, where do you go for that?
Yeah, there is nowhere. I think the traditional space where people would go if they're feeling anxiety or depression or they're having relationship troubles is therapist, of some kind.
Yeah.
And the therapist is only going to address the acute issue, to your point, and it may or may not work. Yeah. And it's also, that therapist is also not going to be looking at those other aspects of your life to see how they're affecting, the problem that you went to go see the therapist for. So it's just what we've learned in Rumble and Rise is everything matters.
Yeah.
And you can't just focus in one area. If you have an area of your life that is unaddressed, it will show up, in the other areas that even, let's just say you're doing a great job in, whatever that is.
Absolutely. And it's also, go ahead, Brittany.
Oh, sorry, Courtney.
Go.
I think a lot of us have scarcity of time right now. So even if we had the desire to seek out a specialist for each one of those things, that's just not feasible. We have jobs and we have kids and we have family obligations and we have households to keep up.
Yeah.
And so being able to capture that in one place is really helpful because you can just give this focus and attention and then certainly specialize where you need to. Like you said, there's always acute issues that you have to kind of drill down on, but it really puts it all together in a package that makes it possible for someone that sometimes, myself in particular, if I don't have time to do it, sometimes I just won't. And
Sure.
so if it did come down to seeking out an expert for each one of those things and going to the gym and going to this and going to that, I just throw my hands up and go, this just isn't even possible. And it makes it feel like it's possible.
Definitely. And the thing that I really want listeners to hear, and I want both of you to speak to, because I think it's one of the unique outcomes of Rumble and Rise, is it's not about me telling you what to do ever. It's about giving you full agency of your own life and giving you the tools to look under the rug of all the crap you've been hiding, right? About like the real issues that you maybe haven't been addressing, and deciding where you want to start with that. Like, where do you want to start cleaning up the mess? And then organizing yourself in a way to make sure that that cleaning up actually happens, and managing your brain and your emotional landscape in a way that allows you to follow through with those promises. And so ultimately, it's, Rumble and Rise, the whole purpose of it is to give women the tools to lead themselves, to self-coach in difficult moments, to sit down and at the end of the day and really ask themselves, like, do you like how you showed up today? And if you don't, it's okay, girl. Like, we all have those days. It's no big deal. But how are we going to course correct so we don't repeat this tomorrow? So do both of you feel that way, that that's kind of what Rumble and Rise helps to offer, is getting you those skill sets?
Yeah, I think that's the best and worst part of it, right? The worst part is that if you have to take accountability for how you have shown or not shown up, you really don't have anyone that you can put blame on. So you have to really confront yourself. But I say that very tongue in cheek because that's also the best part, right? Is that you have the opportunity to take responsibility for it. And I think you do a really great job. I'm constantly telling people, like, your question when you're like, so why aren't you going to do that? Because it's such a great question and such a good thing to reflect on after you get off the call. You're like, well, how does she know I'm not going to do it? But I'm not. So here's why. And then you can develop a plan to maybe better position yourself to actually do it. Yeah. And I love the fact that it's really almost eliminating all of the excuses before you even set off on the path, so that you have to just take full accountability for whether you did it or didn't do it. And like you said, we all have bad days, and it's being able to just say, all right, well, this wasn't great. How do we let that not define us, and we can show up better tomorrow? Yeah. How do we not spiral and make that be like, oh, I had a cheat meal, and so now all of a sudden I'm never going to eat well again for the next 3.5 months.
Right. Or make it a lifestyle, right? Like, some people can stay in that spin cycle for decades. Yeah. Heather, do you have anything to say on that?
Yeah, I would just say the things we learn in Rumble and Rise are really empowering. That's the word that comes to mind. When you learn how to manage your thoughts and, better organize your schedule and all the things that it takes in order to show up well for yourself and your family, you just don't have to outsource anything anymore. You have agency and a process in order to improve whatever the thing that you're struggling with is. You could make it go away with enough work if you're willing to confront it and do the work. Yeah. It's funny, you're going to work yourself out of a job, Courtney, because we're all going to be grown and flown with all these tools. But
I know, but this is the point, right? Like, I always say, like, if there's something that, first of all, like, I always call Rumble and Rise a culture of practice, right? It's a space of practice. We come here to practice leading ourselves. And as long as that practice feels that it needs some support, like for Heather, you and I were talking about our movement practice. Mm-hmm. I still work with movement coaches and I still go to movement classes because I love the infusion of inspiration, and I always learn something, and it helps me to support the way that I want to be showing up for myself. So that's why I continue to do it. But absolutely, the objective is that for any reason, if Rumble and Rise disappeared or something in your life happened where you just knew you couldn't dedicate time and energy to it anymore, the whole idea is that you have the skill sets to fly on your own. And if you don't, I have not done my job, right? Like, that is not the kind of teacher that I want to be. And both of you mentioned this, and I think it's important to highlight, is a lot of times, and again, women are very conditioned to do this, we have such little trust in our ability to make decisions for ourselves, especially in the health arena, that we end up hiring all these people outside of us to tell us what to eat and exactly how to move and all the things. And that maybe can be helpful for a small period of time. But ultimately, what I see a lot of women doing is they're outsourcing the decision making, which then also causes them to outsource the blame.
Yeah.
The program didn't work. The trainer sucks. That I just can't do, that diet doesn't work for me. And so we don't really take ownership that, you need to make a different decision. Like that's really the root of the problem.
Yeah, there's no doubt. I mean, I think especially, working in this space as well as a health coach, I see this all the time. Women especially, they've been through so many yo-yo cycles, of up and down. And, why did they go up? When clearly you can go down, you have just chosen to go up for whatever reason. There was something underlying that was really bothering you and you weren't addressing that issue and you were using food, as a Band-Aid, for whatever the thing was. And until that gets addressed, the cycle's going to continue, and you're going to keep hiring trainers and nutrition people to help you get that into line. But a lot of times they just don't want to go there for whatever reason, or sadly, just the media and the diet and fitness industry has conditioned us, to think that we're worthless unless we look a certain way or, ageless. I hate that word, right? Aging, even.
Or anti-aging.
Anti-aging. I know.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, why can't we embrace who we are today? I guess that's another thing that I've really learned from Rumble and Rise and, maybe sort of the wisdom of being in my late 40s now, but I'm just really comfortable and grateful for the day that I'm in. Why are we always looking ahead or always looking behind? After I sent my husband and 2 of my 3 kids off this morning before we got together, it was really quiet. And I was listening to the birds outside. And I'm like, that's such a wonderful feeling to be in this moment and to hear that sound. Whereas before, while I was, scrambling around with them, I was just oblivious, to that fact that was even happening. And that's a gift, to be comfortable in the moment and to be grateful for just those little things.
Absolutely. And if we're hustling for our worth all the time, or we're trying to prove our worth, a lot of people pleasing, of course, becomes a part of that. And so we're hustling all the time to make everyone around us happy and to take on all the things, even though in our heart we don't really want to be. And then who's got time to listen to the birds?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like you build a habit of never pausing. And I think that that's very intentional on the part of a lot of people, because when we pause, we start to see the truth, right? The truth is revealed in the quiet and in the silence and in kind of in the still moments, which I think is largely why a lot of people keep their life so busy. So we don't have to look at that stuff.
Yes. So true. It is so true.
So what would you say, both of you, is your biggest win? Like in terms of like just being in the space and being a part of Rumble and Rise, and over the course of your experience, what would you say your biggest win is so far? Brittany?
I think my biggest win is that I am more comfortable in the body that I'm in. I'm traditionally a larger size human being than maybe the world would tell you I'm supposed to be. And at the same time, I'm being able to understand that I'm healthy and I'm active and I can do lots of things and I can run lots of miles and my numbers are good. And that health definition isn't necessarily tied to my clothing size. It's how I feel in this body and how this body feels. Certainly you have to realign sometimes. And it's like, I haven't been treating it very well. And like things are achy and sore and it's hurting a little bit. And it's because I haven't been moving as much as I need to. It's because I ate like garbage. And so being able to see that it's the inputs and it's not necessarily the output, and getting a little bit more comfortable with the output. And as long as I like who I am in the mirror, it doesn't really matter what other people think about what size I'm supposed to be.
Yeah. I love that. I mean, that's it. That's a huge win, is being comfortable in your own skin. Right. And I think that you can choose to make health still be the definition of it's just the size of my body. It's just how I look, but that's a choice. right? And beliefs, sometimes, if you haven't been exposed to the work that we teach inside of Rumble and Rise, sometimes people really believe that their thoughts are always true, right? And that what they believe is absolute truth. But the real truth is that our beliefs are just recycled thoughts. And that it's just a thought we chose to believe at some point, probably because we heard it so much that we chose it to believe that it was truth. And I think a big piece of what we do inside of Rumble and Rise is we start to question our beliefs. Why do I believe that I have to exercise 7 days a week? Why do I believe that I shouldn't eat this certain food? Why do I believe that my clothing size defines my worth? And it's the questioning, and you all know, I mean, if anything inside of Rumble and Rise, we ask a lot of questions. And it's because it's that critical thinking that allows us to get to know ourselves. And of course, when we know ourselves, we can lead ourselves really powerfully. Do you want to say anything to that, Heather? What's your biggest win?
Okay. So my biggest win for sure, I think, has been launching my business. And I hired you, Courtney, to help me with that process from the very, very beginning stage. I mean, it was terrifying to try and do something like that. And I just needed your guidance, on the nuts and bolts of how to do that. But also I was big time dealing with imposter syndrome. How could I ever be valuable, to other people, as a new health coach. And I would say just the thought management process that we put ourselves through, within Rumble and Rise was really, really helpful, even in this specific aspect of my life. And also framing what I do on a day-to-day basis into one where, is this business serving me and my goals, or am I serving the business? There's two very different things there. Why am I doing this? And that helps me guide the kind of time and the sort of projects that I am going to put into it. This for me is a passion project. I love sharing my knowledge. I love helping women, and a few men. I have a few men in my practice as well. And making sure that how I'm spending my time is in service of the kind of human that I want to show up to be. So, I'd say it's really helped me in that aspect. And you personally have helped me with just nuts and bolts and just had no clue. So you've been really, really supportive in that way.
Well, and both of you speak again to integrity, right? Like being comfortable with who you are and how you're showing up in the world is integrity. Like, do you like the answers to those questions? And if you do, that's awesome, because there's not like this inner turmoil. We all know what it's like to be in that integrity pain where I want to be living my life a certain way, but my actions are not reflecting that. And it just feels terrible. And yes, pain in your joints or excess weight can feel terrible, but integrity pain, it like chips away at your health. It's like a slow, miserable death. So I do think it helps us to realign ourselves, the work that we do inside the space. So you're both very used to me asking the question, because I ask this question at the start of every coaching call. What is your rise? Which is your win, which you both just shared. And then of course, I always ask, where's your current rumble? Right? Because that's the real work that we're still in. We're always going to have rumbles. Rumbles never go away. That's life, right? Life is 50-50. 50% of it's probably wins and 50% of it is a lot of rumbling. And how well we rumble really determines if we're actually going to get through it, right? And how we're going to come out on the other side with a lot of damage or just the least amount of damage, which I hope it's the latter. So where are you both rumbling? What's your current rumble, Brittany?
I've got a long-term rumble and a short-term rumble.
Okay.
My long-term rumble is that I have a fierce commitment to all or nothing thinking. And I know that that's my battle to fight, and that's my thing to deconstruct. But I'm the kind of person who is going to take off on a run streak and then do it for 500 and some days. And if I can't get my 10,000 steps, why even bother? And so,
why take one?
Yep. I mean, Courtney and I had that conversation on a coaching call where I was like, well, I can't get my 10,000 steps today. And she's like, what about 6? I'm like, I mean, 6 doesn't do anything. She's like, well, it's better than 0. Like, come on, man. And I think I'm really fiercely committed to all or nothing thinking. It's just, I'm all in or I'm all out, and I'm getting better but it's still my area of realignment all the time is like it's being softer and easier on yourself, not being so all in, being like consistently in is so much more important than being all in.
Yeah.
And then my short-term rumble is that I was a big runner. I run a ton. My knee and running don't get along right now. And so there was kind of a period of mourning and really a period of backsliding because I couldn't do that thing. And so being able to pick the pieces back up, find something else that's equally as fun to me, challenging, exciting, will kind of get me going is sort of my short-term rumble. And I'm making good strides and progress with it. But I think that's just a good testament that there's always going to be those rumbles, right? You can be on the best trajectory and something like that's going to throw you off course. And then you have to be the one to decide, yep, I'm going to hop back on. I'm going to go through all of this thought management stuff. I'm going to figure out, like, I'm sad. I'm sad that I can't run. I was sad that I couldn't do a run this year. And it felt like nothing else really replaced that effectively. And then it was kind of having a difficult conversation with myself with the support of a coaching call and Courtney. That's like, okay, be sad and then move forward.
Yeah. Like, don't marinate in it.
Yeah.
It's important to mourn it. Like, of course you're sad. There's nothing wrong with that. And, you're probably not going to lean into experimenting with new things and new opportunities if you allow yourself to just sit in the sadness.
Absolutely.
So it's like, it is possible to mourn something and be looking for new opportunity.
Yeah.
And that's really the space you're in. And isn't it funny with transitions? Like, I know both of you are moms, but whether it's like when you first graduated from high school or you got your first job or you had your children, it feels so awkward at first. Like, you just do not feel like you have footing. It feels like you're all over the place. But then with more practice, you really start to feel grounded and confident and you find your stride again. And we want transitions to be like 24 hours. I had a baby and I want to know how to mother now, tomorrow. And it's just not how it works. So and I say this just in reference to what you're talking about with the running, right? That right now you're in that kind of messy space of trying some things on and staying open-minded and trying to get a feel for what might be that thing for you. And I have no doubt it will come. And we just don't know the timing of it.
Yeah.
It's just you continuing to show up.
And it's so closely connected to that all or nothing thinking because
Sure.
I think it's rooted in you want to be good at it, right? I'm good at skiing. I'm good at running. Those things, I can just show up and be my best self. I mean, not always. We know how running works. Some days you have bad days, but you know how to do it. You know how to push through those miles. And when you're finding something new, you have to be a beginner again. You have to, for lack of a better word, suck again. And that's really uncomfortable.
But maybe the new thought is I'm learning how to be good at being a beginner.
Absolutely.
Right? Like, you want to be good at something, learn how to be good at being a beginner.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's flipping the switch to know that, like, what a wonderful opportunity to get good at something else too, and to go through that space of learning. But there's a lot of self-coaching that goes into thinking that way instead of just being like, oh, this is hard. It's being like, how great is it that this gets to be hard?
And I want to offer you, just based on kind of your definition of health at this age and stage of life, which is like your future in terms of the aging process and how well that goes. We know that the human brain actually like rewires and refires and becomes more robust when we're learning new skills. And I have been so guilty of staying in my comfort zone with a lot of things in my life because it's comfortable and I'm good at it and I don't have to work super hard at it. But the downside of that is I'm also not growing my brain. It's just part of who I am at this point. So I think there's an invitation in that based on your current definition of health that could really kind of help inspire you to be the beginner, to master, like, what does it mean to be an awesome beginner?
That's a wonderful point. Thank you.
Yeah. Heather, how about you? Where's the rumble?
Well, I've got a couple.
Okay.
But before I even share, I just loved that conversation around rumbles often emerge from wanting to be good at something, but you're just not good yet. And that is such the truth. We are so comfortable in our comfort zones. We know we're winning. That feels good. Maybe we're recognized by our peers and our family for being good at it, but there is no growth, in that space. And for me, my first rumble is I'm still new, right, at my business. And there's a couple of projects that I'm working on that I am so new and so uncomfortable in right now. One of which is a new class, that I've been launching, and I'm still tweaking it, and I'm not totally happy, with the first phase and how it went. So, I got to do that, improve it, keep people coming back. I've got to grow it, and so that means marketing, which I don't love, but it has to happen. And so I'm having to lean into some technical things, around the marketing that I am just totally uncomfortable with right now. And the only way to get past it is to do. And I just have to lean into the do and to the action and to the practice of doing that in order to get to this place where I do want to go eventually with it. So that's number one. And then the second one is my oldest child, my daughter, is 17 years old. She is a high school junior, and we've been on a whole bunch of college tours lately. It's like the whole junior year, right, is about college prep and getting her launched. And we've been all over the country, looking at schools. And it's sort of like there's this intensive project to get her out the door. And that terrifies me that she's leaving, at the same time. And our life is going to be so different, at home without her here. And so I am really struggling emotionally with her leaving. And even though it's such an intense time right now, and we're spending so much time together, and there's so much parenting happening, as it relates to getting her into the school, whatever school she's going to end up in. Yeah, I'm really afraid of what life is going to look like fall of 2023 when she's out the door.
Yeah.
So
it's that uncertainty, which I think we all wrestle with a lot, is like, I don't know what's on the other side of this. And yet we never know. Like with anything in life, you don't know walking out the door this morning what's going to happen. Really, like you think you can predict a lot of it, and you can, but there's a lot we can't predict. So I want to ask you, because you said something really powerful. I'm really struggling right now with just the emotions. And I just want to pick away a little bit into that. Is it that you're struggling with the emotions, or you're having emotions about?
Yeah, good point. Yeah, no, I'm not struggling with the emotions. I would say I'm having the emotions. I think in a previous time, I would be struggling with the emotions because I would feel like, well, I should be feeling great about this. You know, look at what a great job she did. She's college ready and is going to go. But the sadness is telling me something about myself, my relationship with her, and then maybe just how
it mattered. That
we are. Yeah. Why is that bad?
It's not. It's beautiful. Yeah, I love it. And you both know, this is such a big part of Rumble and Rise, right? Learning how to feel all the emotion of the human experience. So we're not doing things to resist emotion or numb emotion, which is what a lot of people are using, the food and the alcohol and, working and shopping and all the things for. So it's really, again, inviting emotion in and just willing to, I always say, bring it to the table, let it have a seat, and just get to know it. Why are you here? Oh, because I spent 18 years raising this beautiful human who I have been with every single day and have an incredible relationship with. Of course, I'm going to be sad about the prospect of not seeing her every day. That is such a tribute to that relationship to feel that sadness. What a horrible thing to deny yourself that.
Yes, that's a great way to reframe it. And, in Rumble and Rise, we're always talking about how those emotions are just, it's just information, it's telling you something about what's going on in your life, and it's not to be avoided. It's just, what's it telling me and how can I move forward with it?
What's the message here? Yeah. So beautiful. All right. I know we said we do 45 minutes. We're almost at an hour, but in closing, thank you. It was such a good conversation. Is there anything you want a listener to know or any closing words before we go? I appreciate you both so much. You're both amazing humans. I feel so honored to kind of travel alongside of you. And thank you for making time on a Saturday morning, no less.
I think if a listener's on the fence, they should do it. I listened to your podcast and lurked on the community and kind of was, maybe for years, probably a year and a half.
Yeah.
And then finally actually only took the jump because you had given a giveaway and I won some free months.
Yes.
And have stayed after that. And if I had it to do over, I would have jumped in like the 3 times before that when I thought about doing so.
Yeah.
Because it's a tremendous amount of information that's really helpful. The coaching calls are so validating because you realize that the things that you're thinking about and struggling, so many other people who are so incredibly different from you, different ages, different geography, different socioeconomic status. And we all kind of have really similar sets of rumbles and problems. And it's sometimes you don't even know that you have that problem until you hear someone else get coached through it. And you're like,
So
whoa, I'm doing that too.
Yes.
And so it's just tremendously helpful. And there's so much to think about and work through. And you don't even know until you sort of get in and start doing it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Love that. How about you, Heather?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that I can't think of a better value for the amount of tools and coaching that you get. And I like how you can get to it on your own time. So the way that your website's set up, you can listen to a masterclass or watch a workshop whenever it's convenient for you. And even if you can't join the coaching calls live, they're so valuable to listen to on the private podcast. To Bethany's point, there's probably something shared in that call that's going to be relevant to your life. And I have just found it so valuable in so many ways. And I think it's just so cheap, you should be charging more, but I won't tell you.
Well, potentially maybe down the road we will be.
Yeah. I mean, it's a no-brainer, like I signed up for a year and of course I renewed, for another year because the work is never over. And we all have these underlying rumbles or demons, or whatever you want to call them, even if they're not visible, to the outside world. But aren't you going to feel better once you address those things?
Yeah. And I think what both of you have mentioned, and I feel so strongly about this too, is it's normalizing the rumble. Life is full of rumbles. It just is. And if we can navigate that in a way that makes us feel at peace with how we showed up in that's really the name of the game, right? And I see a lot of women making the rumble so unnecessarily hard, right? Like the rumble is hard enough, but then we dump all this extra stress because of the way we're thinking about the rumble and because of the way we're not processing emotions around the rumble. So it's really normalizing the rumble, which I think that's why I started the space because I needed it too, right? I'm with you. When I do group coaching calls, I can identify with almost every issue that's coming to the table. And so it's just that community piece and having very open and honest conversations that life is tough and I'm here for it.
And I think normalizing the rumble is so important in the time that we live in where like everything is Instagram worthy and fitness influencer. And even the girl you went to high school with is only ever putting their best foot forward on the internet. And so it's hard not to look at that and be like, what am I doing wrong? Yeah. And then you realize that that's a facade and that everyone's got stuff back behind there and that it's okay to be authentic and vulnerable and share that. And that's far more endearing than the rest of it.
Yeah, absolutely. So appreciate both of you. This was a great conversation. And I know that listeners will get a lot of value out of it. I hope you have a beautiful Saturday. And I just so appreciate you being here. Thank you. Thank you so much for listening today. And if this landed for you and you too are someone who is looking for a space to approach health from a more holistic perspective and really put you in the driver's seat of your experience, I would encourage you to check out all the details of this program by going to graceandgrit.com/ready to rumble. There's really 4 camps of work that we lean into inside this space. We talk about chemistry a lot, metabolism, blood sugar, the importance of strength training, all of these things. But we also talk about SMART strategy, which is a strategy that keeps you in a space of whelm, not overwhelm. We also talk about thought management and emotional agility, because without those last two pieces, managing your thoughts and managing your emotions, it's really difficult to create sustainable behavior change. In fact, I would argue that it's impossible. So if this sounds like it might be something that would be a good fit for you, once again, graceandgrit.com/ready to rumble. And I hope I'll see you on the inside. Take care. Thank you for listening to the Grace and Grit podcast. It is time to mend the fabric of the female health story. And it starts with you taking radical responsibility for your own self-care. You are worth the effort. And with a little grace and grit, anything is possible.